Welcome to Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Vanessa Rose, and we're so happy that you decided to tune in and join us for another great edition today. Today we are going to be speaking about youth, and we are joined by Dan Brodeur, who is the director of the Refuge Youth Center. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dan.
Oh, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. You've been a guest on the show before, and you always have wonderful things to share. Our viewing audience always loves the information that you're sharing because you're working hands-on every day with the youth. And
Right.
so you know what's going on in their minds, you know what the issues are at hand, you know what's really happening in our community with them. But before we get started in our first topic, would you mind sharing people that haven't seen you on here before about yourself, what you do,
Sure.
why you do it?
Yeah. I run a youth center in North Phoenix. I've actually been doing it for about 5 years in this location, but I've been working with youth for almost 20 years. And the youth center that we run in North Phoenix is called The Refuge, and it's a 25,000 square foot facility that we have put into it: auto shop, art, dance, an indoor skate park, and then lots of other little things that we do there with the kids that we allow them the opportunity to come and kind of work on some skill sets as well as have a safe place to come to. And we do those programs for free as long as the kids enroll themselves in a program we call Better Me, a Better Tomorrow, which is an accountability program that rewards them for the things that they do that are positive, like grades, jobs, those types of things, community service, which is a big one, but also removes or gives them some accountability when they don't. So if they're fighting, smoking, getting into trouble, and that kind of helps us be a part of and partner with parents and schools to kind of help kids, especially at-risk kids, develop some much-needed characteristics like hard work and integrity and those types of things. So the program itself is kind of the whole enchilada. All the other stuff is dressing on the cake, and I always tell people it's kind of like the carrot we dangle in front of them. You know, it's really bribery. Hey, come here, you can learn automotive, you can do art, you can skate, you know, scooter, ride your bike, whatever it is. We have a weight room. All of those things, we'll do it totally for free, but get enrolled in this program and then we can work with you, which is, it's turned out really great, actually.
That's great, because it almost sounds like you're doing what unfortunately a lot of families or single parent homes, or a lot of parents aren't involved in kids' lives like maybe
Right.
they were a few generations ago, or the way my parents were whenever I was a kid.
Right.
So you're essentially doing what the parents probably should be doing, which is holding them accountable and
Right.
saying, hey, you know, good decision, good benefit, bad decision, consequence.
Yeah. Well, there's a real serious misnomer in today's generation in which there is a disconnect between the life I want and the reality that I must work for it. And I think that that's a part of the fact that a lot of kids are raised in homes that are either only one parent is involved, in some cases neither parent is involved. You're being raised by grandparents, and even more increasingly I'm seeing friends raise other friends' kids, or sisters or brothers raising nieces and nephews. So it's very common for a child to be raised in a setting in which there's only one parent at home, and often it's the mom, and so there's a breakdown of the things that you talk about, the rules, the things that the generation before would be very rare. You know, even when I was a kid, and if you go further back, it was more prominent. Even when I was a kid, very few of my friends didn't have chores. They didn't have responsibilities. It was very rare. So at a young age, you were being told, hey, you know, you need to come up. And I had a great family friend who, after dinner, everybody cleaned the kitchen. We got up, we all went to the kitchen. Everybody had a part to play in cleaning the kitchen. And just little things like that may not seem like a big deal, but as you're being developed into a man or woman, it is a big deal. You need to recognize that things have to get done. So the program's there to provide the opportunity to do it in a fun way.
Yeah.
And in a rewarding way, rather than them just hearing, you know, being yelled at. We have all this stuff at the youth center, and we kind of utilize it to build relationships and then help them develop those skill sets.
That is awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking time away from the Refuge Youth Center to be here today and to share with us some great topics about youth.
Yeah.
So for all of you at home, today we are discussing youth, and our first topic is the war against right and wrong.
Yes.
Tell me. So how do you define the war against right and wrong?
Well, there is definitely a war against right or
Yes.
wrong. Right or wrong is being packaged as to each their own. So you have, and really it's being packaged as that. So kids on the offset would say, oh yeah, everybody kind of has the freedom to define and decide what right and wrong, what's right and what's wrong, what's right and what's wrong. And then you have the people that are selling it, which is pop culture and those things, whether it's music or Hollywood. They're the ones that are selling us on this idea that everybody gets to define, and we must respect each other's decision as to what's right and as to what's wrong. And unfortunately, they're telling us all that we each get to decide that, but in reality, they're deciding it. So they're producing movies and music and more, especially during this time or this season, they love to get up in their award shows and tell us, you know, what's right and what's wrong. There's a real danger in this. There's a danger socially. I mean, you can't have civilized society in which everybody in the cul-de-sac has a different opinion as to what is right and what's wrong. I mean, you can't say, well, I've decided that, you know, it's okay for me to play my music as loud as I want until 3 a.m. as long as it's in my house, even though it keeps, you know,
all the neighbors awake.
Right. And obviously that's taking it and going, well, there's got to be some respect. When you take this idea all the way down the road, and I always tell kids, you shouldn't come up with an idea that you're not willing to see to the end. So, or I always like to say, don't push a rock that you don't want to hit the bottom. You don't push that rock off that cliff and go, well, I don't want to hit the bottom with that. But the reality is when you're teaching people that right and wrong is to each their own. So everybody gets to make up their own version of what's right and what's wrong. There's a lot of negative things that happen, especially when you're talking about a generation of upcoming kids who can't control their own emotion. So if we start going, well, there really is no clearly defined right and wrong, right? I mean, even the law. So look at across the spectrum. You can look at from, unfortunately, all levels of government, all over this country. You're seeing people that are breaking the law and then getting away with it for one reason or another, in which there's excuses that are being made as to why, well, you know, we really shouldn't, you know, we shouldn't do this or we shouldn't do that, or it's, you know, and of course it's always predicated on
This is wrong, but there's always a but, and whenever there's a but.
Well, there's always a but, and then you're always made to feel like if you say that's wrong, you who are you to judge? I mean, that's my favorite.
Well, I think the right term for it is what, moral relativism.
Yeah, and it really is. Yeah.
And there's no standard anymore.
Yes.
And like you said, if you want to have a civil society, you have to be able to say clearly, these are manners.
Yes.
This is the way you interact with other
Yes.
people. This is the way that you do these things.
Right.
And there's a reason that for generations.
Right. It's been there.
It's been there. And you're right, because even now, whenever you interact with people, it's funny, as I get older, I always feel like this generation, but it is becoming the younger generation. The communication skill, even the way that they interact with adults, the way that they treat people.
Right.
You see these outbreaks of violence now that before you've never seen. You see people beating each other up, and you see just, even now out in like the places where you go out at night and all of that world, I read stories all the time now from 10 years ago, whenever people were out at night, they didn't just get into fights all the time and all these things. And now it's just always happening. There's nowhere.
Well, they can find fame in it too.
Yeah.
Now they can find fame in it. My wife and I always joke around because we always say, "Thank goodness there wasn't social media when we were kids." But the truth is that it does. You know, once you break this down, we go down this path in which we've decided everybody gets to choose what is right to them and what is wrong to them, we create chaos. I mean, and the framers of our Constitution said that without the principles, now the framers said if we're not rooted in the principles of Christianity, chaos would ensue. And Thomas Jefferson was pointing out that the Constitution is written in a way that if we don't govern ourselves, the Constitution gives way to chaos, because then you're free to do whatever you want. We live in a time in which our kids are empowered to believe that if they feel it, then it's right. If they feel it, so if this is what I feel like doing, who am I to deny myself? And really empowered to the point of saying, like, well, follow your heart. I mean, there's a lot of things that have just been embedded them.
Well, and there's this whole new, I mean, it's this terminal. I've heard so many of these little acronyms now that I feel it's painful sometimes to hear what they mean.
Right.
But there's this whole, YOLO.
Right.
You only live once.
Right.
And whenever you look at the people that promote that,
right,
and you listen to their music,
right,
and you listen to what they're saying, it's this sense, it seems almost, as this generation is so consumed with their own selfish desires that, well, this is what I feel, so I'm going to do it. And if you tell me I'm wrong, then how dare you, and who do you think you are?
Yeah.
I can't even fathom, even whenever I was young, and God knows we've all done stupid things whenever we were young, and like you said, thank God there wasn't Facebook and all that. But at the same time, there was always still this level of consciousness and a conscience behind every decision I made. And even whenever I did stupid things, I would feel guilty.
Right.
But now there's literally no guilt associated because it seems as though society is saying, here, just do whatever you want.
Yeah.
What is it really that dangerous, and why is it happening?
Yeah.
Do they want chaos?
Well, some of them, yeah, absolutely. Well, but some of them would say there shouldn't be chaos because they've never seen it, and they don't understand the principles that created the society that they are blessed with. So they look around and they think, well, isn't that how it's always been? So why are we changing things? They don't want to harness or discipline themselves. They don't want self-control. They don't want to have to deny. They don't want accountability, and they don't want to have to deny themselves. And what it gives root to is this mentality of just because I lied, it doesn't make me a liar. Just because I stole doesn't make me a thief. Just because and this is a very real temperament in this upcoming generation. Well, they will argue with you. They believe wholeheartedly. You say, well, you're a liar. No, I'm not. But you just lied to me. But that doesn't make me a liar.
Say, well, then what does that make you?
Yes. Well, and it's hard. How do you talk to a kid who go, look, you've got to grow up. You can't function like this in society, and they're not. They're not functioning like that. They're going out and they're discovering that ultimately I'm going to do whatever it takes for me, and if that means breaking a few laws, hurting a few people, I must do that. I was talking to kids the other day, and I said, it's funny because we think right and wrong is up to us, but the truth is we each have a standard, and we want everybody to live by our standard, but we don't want anybody to impose their standard on us. We don't think telling a lie is a big deal until somebody tells us a lie, right? We don't think stealing something is a really big deal until somebody steals from us. I had kids the other day who just got really angry because their bike was stolen by some other kids, and they got on social media and they said, those dumb tweakers stole my bike. Well, what's funny is these kids steal and smoke weed. And so I said to them, so it's okay to do drugs except when you're doing a different drug than you're doing, and it's okay for you to steal, but it's not okay to be stolen from. And the reality is they would say, yes, that's absolutely right. And you think, where do we go from here? And it all begins with this war on right and wrong, in which we don't want to have to submit to a core philosophy in life, which you could go as basic as the 10 Commandments if you wanted to, but the reality is you don't want to submit to this core philosophy in life in which you want there to be this vacillating idea of right and wrong. You want to be in control of when telling a lie is actually wrong. You want to be in control of when cheating is actually wrong, when speeding is actually wrong. You want to be in control of that. So we push on and push and push and have probably for 20 years through movies and music that, come on, sometimes the wrong thing is the right thing. Sometimes the wrong. And over time, it's developed into this real issue within kids that we're raising.
I believe it's almost a desensitization, though, that's occurring. Because I remember the other day I was at the gym and I was in spin class.
Right.
And they were playing music that I don't typically listen to that's part of this whole new movement of things. And as I was sitting there doing my spin class to kind of concentrate, I was starting to listen to the words of some of these songs.
You're like shocked.
And I'm sitting there horrified.
Yeah.
Because even in my little rebellious stage, when I listened to some of the music, 10 years ago, it wasn't even remotely what it is today.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the stuff that kids are listening to
over and over
now.
and over again, yeah.
And they're saying the words and they're listening to it and it's going to them. So it's almost, they're not shocked by anything.
No.
The shock factor is gone.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they don't want to be defined by their own actions. They don't in that it's impossible. There's a lot of wonderful sentiment out there in which it's like, forget about the past. All those other things, which to a certain degree they're true, But the reality is we are the orchestrators of our own future. And when we teach our kids that there aren't consequences, and it goes all the way down to kids being on a sports team that everybody wins. You're teaching your kid that it doesn't matter what you do or how you do it, right? And that may seem like an overreach, like, oh my gosh, that's dramatic.
No, it's the generation of everyone gets a trophy.
Everyone gets a trophy. But the underlying truth in everybody gets a trophy is you don't have to work harder. You don't have to learn how to do that the right way in order to receive the reward. You just have to participate. And that's not life. You can't just say, well, just participate in life. You have to learn how to do things the right way in order to receive the reward. And we've gone out there and said, oh, that's not that big of a deal, and it's causing havoc in our kids. And they're confused when what they expected to get out of life isn't what they end up getting out of life. And all this confusion and mental illness and depression begins to take place because we're not teaching them, hey, do this and you'll achieve anything. We're teaching them, do whatever you want and success will come to you. Right?
I wish it worked that way. Darn it. Why didn't they tell me that? That would have been wonderful.
Right, absolutely.
If only that's the way life really worked. Well, thank you so much, Dan. As always, we could go on for 2 or 3 hours about this very topic, but it's been wonderful to discuss this first topic with you. And for all of you at home, please don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this short message.
I was feeling so alone.
I was going through a really difficult time.
I didn't want to bother anyone.
I didn't think they'd understand.
It was tough at first, but I did it.
I'm glad I asked for help.
I asked my teacher.
I asked my dad.
You can do this.
Whatever it is, ask for help.
If you're thinking about suicide or need support, call the Trevor Lifeline. Trained counselors are there to help 24/7.
Hello and welcome back to Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Vanessa Rose, and thank you so much for staying with us if you just happen to be joining us. Today we are joined by Dan Brodeur, and he's the director of the Refuge Youth Center here in the Valley. And thank you so much for staying with us, Dan.
Absolutely.
As always, so much information that this program could go for like 6 hours, but we want to try to go ahead and get this in here. We're discussing youth still, and our second topic is alcohol is no big deal. We're not saying it's no big deal. It's a little play on words there for all of you at home before you freak out.
Right.
Tell me about alcohol in youth, and why should we reconsider the conversation about alcohol in youth?
This is a topic that I take on a lot, and I become very unpopular with a lot of people, but I take it on because I think our perspective has been really tainted in our country towards the topic of alcohol. And so rather than try to come at it from a hard angle, I really like to come at it from just a reasonable, let's talk facts. And let's talk facts, and then let's talk about how we would address those facts in any other area of our life. And it's really kind of what I was hoping to do, is throw those out there and then the viewers say, look, just think about these things and how you address them. One is WebMD put out an article, I think about a year ago, and on the article listed the top 20 most damaging substances in our country. So top 20 most damaging substances. I think it was the top 20, top 15. Number 1 on the list was alcohol.
Wow.
Heroin was second, crack was third, down the list was meth, tobacco. I mean, but number 1 on the list of the most damaging substance in our country was alcohol. You got to think, statistically speaking, alcohol is responsible for between 80 and 90,000 deaths every year.
Wow.
80 and 90,000 deaths. In contrast, there are about 7,000 to 9,000 gunshot deaths in our country every year.
Wow.
Right? So you think about, so between 7,000 and 9,000 people die from gunshot wounds in our country, yet all you hear about is gun control. 80 to 90,000 people die from alcohol-related accidents, alcohol-related whatever.
Overdose, whatever's happening.
Whatever it happens to be, 80 to 90,000 every single year.
And nobody's talking about it.
Nobody's talking about it. It really is kind of the opiate of the masses. It's something we have become so comfortable with, and yet we're not addressing it. And you could look at just the deaths. There are over 60 diseases directly linked to alcohol use.
Wow.
Over 60 diseases. And then you take that, now we can't even discuss the numbers in regards to how many kids are abused because of alcohol, how many divorces take place, how many acts of adultery, how many college girls are raped. You can't even take into consideration all that alcohol does, or at least inspires and plays a heavy role in. Alcohol is responsible for so much destruction within our communities and within our country. And when we have this is the way I like to look at it, and this is why I wanted to bring it up. When we have a casual relationship with this substance, considering the facts, when you have a casual relationship, you would never say, I was talking to the kids and I said to them, when we talk about alcohol, because they say, well, what's the big deal? I would say, well, would you take these numbers and apply them to anything else? I mean, think of the excuses we use to have a casual relationship with alcohol when you consider these numbers and say to yourself, even food, if your favorite restaurant, if you attached these kinds of numbers and said, well, the number of people that leave that restaurant and end up hitting their wife or their child, the number of people that go to that restaurant end up committing adultery, the number of people that go to the restaurant end up coming away with the disease, the number of people, you would go, I'm not gonna go to that restaurant. Yet for some reason in our country, we have developed this affection for alcohol that it becomes this visual symbol in so much of our social media. I mean, it becomes the center point. It's not just that it exists, it's
the center point of pop culture too. I mean, songs are written about it. It's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's, watching celebrities and partying and all this stuff.
Yes. If you took all the other substances on that list and added them up together as far as the number of deaths that they're responsible for in a year, it's less than 50% of how many alcohol is related for. And you think about commercials, right? As a society, I mean, could you imagine if we had commercials in which at the end of, so you've got all these young, attractive people playing golf, they go for a bike ride and then they golf and then they finish their day on the beach with heroin. We would never, right? We would be like,
I thought you were talking about a beer commercial.
Well, that's my point. That's my point. We go, that's absurd. But what we have now is in Arizona, next year is set to legalize marijuana. And for whatever anybody wants to say about marijuana, it's a real issue. And once we have a casual relationship with one abusive substance, how in the world are we going to stand before our kids and say, look, even though the difference becomes this, I've chosen a different substance, so therefore it's okay. If you choose this substance to abuse, it's wrong, but this substance, and if you wanted to do it on merit, that'd be fine. But it isn't based on merit. Alcohol's far worse.
Wow.
So you can say, well, if alcohol is okay to abuse from time, we only abuse it on the holidays. We only abuse it on, I mean, if we were to say,
occasions,
well, could you imagine if somebody said to you, well, I'm a functional heroin addict. You'd be like, you can't, well, I only do it on the weekends. You would say, absolutely, you can't. No.
They would be an outcast in society. You're not acceptable.
No. So I put that out there not because I want to, get out there and try and fight against this billion-dollar industry. I'm hoping that there'll be a few people that would look at the numbers and go, man, this casual relationship that I have with alcohol isn't good. I can't have my kids, I can't have my friends, I can't have people look at this and go, what's the big deal? Because ultimately, as marijuana becomes legal, when you've got a war against right and wrong, and then you're legalizing marijuana, we're not far from seeing a lot more substances being legalized, and then we're gonna find ourselves in a real world of hurt. Because regardless of what people would like to say, the truth is marijuana is a gateway drug. If you were to go out on the streets and visit with everybody that struggles with addiction, no matter what the addiction is now, I would guarantee that 9 out of 10 would say the first drug I ever did was marijuana. Was marijuana. Now, and you could say, well, not everybody that does marijuana ends up there. That's not my point. Do we care about the people that do? So I'm not into legislation. I'm not into saying we must make something illegal. I'm into personal responsibility.
Yes.
I'm into people taking responsibility for themselves and for the community that they live in. Our country is great because our forefathers and the generations that went before us thought of others before themselves.
Before they acted.
Yeah.
Whenever they made a decision, like now, I mean, you see the deaths associated with alcohol and drinking and driving.
Yeah.
That's, I think, the perfect example of someone that's not thinking of others before they think of themselves and thinking, well, I'm just going to get in my car, I'm fine, I can do this, and then you end up hurting someone else or yourself.
Yes.
And that personal responsibility, I think, kind of ties in perfectly to our first topic.
Right.
Right and wrong.
Right.
And having that conscience, having that little Jiminy Cricket that's sitting on your shoulder that's saying, hey, what are you doing? Are you really thinking of other people and stopping yourself?
Yeah.
before you make that decision. Because alcohol is, I know that they say that there's, over 60% of like youth before they enter college will have tried alcohol?
Oh, yeah. And marijuana's worse now. Marijuana's worse.
Really?
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah. You won't even be able to, we won't be able to even comprehend what it's going to be like once it's legal. Because even now, the vast majority of kids that I know...
I've been to some places and known people of influence, and it gets pulled out somewhere. And it's something that has always shocked me.
We go to California twice a year, every year. We go to the same exact location every year, twice a year. And since they legalized marijuana in Colorado, the last 2 trips that I've gone to the same neighborhood, I have yet to leave the house and not smelt marijuana. Yet in use, so people will say legalizing isn't going to change the usage. That's not true. It's not even remotely true. And the reality is this is destructive. And there is something in our DNA about being constructive. We want to contribute. We don't want to just contribute to our homes. We want to contribute to our communities. We want to contribute. We want to be a productive part of society. This behavior is destructive. And it's not destructive just in what we consider to be destructive in our emotions, in our psyche. It's destructive. So it's vitally important that we're honest, intellectually honest with ourselves when it comes to approaching these things. That's why I wanted to go over the numbers, because you can't look at those numbers and then just kind of blow it off.
Parents need to be aware, and I think that's the most important thing. And being here today and sharing that today, for all of the parents out there, the aunts or the uncles or the grandparents that are raising your children, look, this is something that it's real and it's happening.
Right.
And even the good kids, even the kids that you think it's never going to affect, it's out there. And unless you leave your children locked in your home 24 hours a day, they're going to be exposed to it. So educate them.
Yes.
Educate yourselves. Be aware. Teach them from a young age the difference between right and wrong, and let them know what they're going to encounter.
Right.
So thank you so much, Dan,
Absolutely.
as always, for the great information and for everything you're doing down at the Refuge Center. And as always, thank you at home for watching. I hope this has been helpful to you and your family, and we look forward to seeing you here next week on Joy in Our Town.
This program has been sponsored by the Trinity Broadcasting Network and is made possible by your telethon dollars. Your continual support can keep Joy in Our Town coming to your home every week. Write to Joy in Our Town, Post Office Box A, Santa Ana, California, 92711.